When my grandson clutched my hand that evening, his tiny fingers trembling, I thought he was just being playful. But when I looked into his eyes, wide, wet, and terrified, I felt something inside me twist. I'm so glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe to my channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. Grandma, please, he whispered, his voice cracking, don't go back home tonight. Please don't. For a moment I just stood there staring at him. The kitchen clock ticked loudly above us, each second slicing through the silence. Outside the rain had started again, gentle but cold, like the kind that sneaks into your bones. What do you mean, sweetheart? I asked, trying to smile. Your mom's waiting for me, it's getting late. He shook his head violently, clutching tighter. No, don't go. They said bad things are going to happen when you come back. My heart stuttered. Who said that? But before he could answer, I heard the familiar sound of my daughter's heels clicking on the tiled floor. And just like that, he went silent, his hand slipping away from mine. Mom, my daughter said with her usual tight smile. The car's ready. Let's not keep anyone waiting. Her voice had that practiced calmness, soft, polite, and painfully distant. I wanted to ask her what was wrong. I wanted to hold her and tell her I still saw the little girl who used to braid my hair and bake cookies beside me. But the woman standing in front of me was not my little girl anymore. She was a stranger wearing my daughter's face. As I walked out of my grandson's room, he whispered one last time, barely audible, Please, Grandma, don't let them send you away. Those words followed me all the way home. That night the rain wouldn't stop. It beat against the window like an urgent warning. I tried reading my old prayer book, but the words blurred. My mind kept replaying that look in my grandson's eyes. Fear mixed with love. Something was wrong. I could feel it. At 72, I've learned to trust silence more than words. Silence tells you everything you need to know, especially in families where love becomes currency and kindness becomes weakness. For months I had felt something shifting in my house. The whispers, the closed doors, the half-finished conversations when I entered a room. But I told myself I was overthinking. That my daughter, Clara, and her husband were just stressed. New house, new business, new responsibilities. I thought love could fix it, but I was wrong. When I reached home, the front lights were off. That never happened before. The house looked unfamiliar, cold, hollow, like it had already let go of me. Inside, the dining table was bare, though we always had tea together before bed. My chair was missing from its usual place. I walked to the living room and froze. Several cardboard boxes were lined up neatly against the wall, labeled with my name. Mom's things, bedroom, Mom's books, Mom, kitchenware. I felt the air leave my lungs. That's when I saw a folded envelope on the coffee table. It had my name on it, written in Clara's careful handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. Mom, it read, I hope you'll understand that we need some space. Things haven't been working well with you living here. It's for everyone's peace of mind. We've arranged for you to stay at Maple Rest Home for a while. They'll take good care of you. Please don't be upset. Love, Clara. My knees went weak. I sat down slowly, holding the letter like it was something poisonous. Maple Rest Home, that was a nursing facility, 40 minutes away. My daughter, the same daughter who once cried in my lap when her first love broke her heart, was sending me away. Without even a conversation, just a letter. I don't know how long I sat there, listening to the rain and the sound of my own heart breaking. It wasn't just about leaving my home. It was about realizing that I no longer belonged in the life I had built brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. Every inch of that house held a memory. The curtains I'd sewn myself, the family portraits I dusted every morning, the little wooden box where I kept my late husband's watch. And now I was being boxed up like old furniture. When Clara came home later that night, she looked startled to see me awake. Mom, you weren't supposed to read that yet, she said, lowering her voice. I looked at her carefully. How long have you been planning this? Please don't make this harder than it already is, she sighed. It's for your own good. You'll be around people your age. You'll have nurses, activities. You'll be happier there. Happier? I repeated softly. Do you think happiness comes from being put away? She looked away. You've been difficult lately, always questioning, always criticizing. "We just need peace, Mom, peace." That word, so gentle, so cruel. I wanted to tell her that all I ever wanted was her peace. That every harsh word came from worry, not anger. That every tear I hid was to keep her strong. But something in her tone told me it wouldn't matter. She had made her choice. That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat by the window and watched the street lights flicker against the wet road. I thought of my grandson, his warning, and I realized he knew. He knew what his mother was planning, and it broke his little heart. A child's love can see through everything, lies, masks, pretenses. He saw the truth even when I refused to. Morning came quietly. The movers arrived without a word of greeting. They started carrying boxes, my boxes, out the front door. Clara avoided my eyes. She just kept checking her phone, giving instructions, pretending not to notice when one of the men dropped a box marked Dad's things and the sound of shattered glass filled the room. I wanted to scream, but my throat was dry. When everything was packed, she said softly, "Mom, your room at Maple Rest is ready. Let's go." I didn't answer. I just stood there, watching the sunlight fall across the floor, right where my husband used to stand every morning, humming while he made tea. That light had once meant comfort. Now it felt like goodbye. As we drove, I stared out the window, trying not to cry. The city blurred into colors, gray buildings, green trees, flashes of people who all seemed to have somewhere to belong. And then I thought again of my grandson, his shaking hands, his desperate plea, "Don't go back home." Now I understood. He wasn't afraid of me going home that night. He was afraid of what would happen after. He had overheard something dark. But it was too late now. I was being driven away from the life I knew, from the family I raised, from the love I once believed unbreakable. And as we pulled into the long driveway of Maple Rest home, lined with roses and trimmed hedges, I whispered to myself, how did I become a stranger in my own story? When you're young, you never think the people you love most will one day become the source of your deepest heartbreak. You raise them, feed them, pray for them, believing love is enough to hold everything together. But life has a strange way of showing you that love without respect is just dependency wearing a mask. Clara was my firstborn. She came into the world on a winter morning so cold the doctor's breath fogged as he laughed and said, "She's got her mother's stubborn lungs." Even as a baby, she had a fire in her. She wanted to be held only by me. She'd cry if someone else tried to rock her. Back then, we didn't have much. My husband Daniel worked long hours as a mechanic, and I taught part-time at a small school. We lived in a 2-room apartment above a bakery. I used to joke that Clara's first lullaby was the sound of the bread oven. But those were happy days, hard yet pure. Daniel would bring home leftover pastries, and Clara would clap her tiny hands covered in flour, saying, "Daddy brought clouds," and every night before bed he'd look at me and say, "Someday, May, we'll give her the world." We almost did. Years passed and our little apartment became a modest home, nothing fancy, just a place filled with warmth. I planted roses out front, the kind that bloomed deep red, because Daniel said they looked like joy wearing perfume. When Clara turned 10, Daniel fell sick. The doctors called it a heart condition. I called it the beginning of goodbye. He passed away on a rainy afternoon, the same kind of rain that would fall years later when my grandson warned me not to go home. That day, I promised myself 2 things. I would never remarry, and I would make sure Clara never lacked love, education, or comfort, no matter what it cost me. I didn't know then how high that cost would be. Clara was always smart, ambitious. She graduated top of her class and earned a scholarship to a university in the city. I was so proud. I sold Daniel's old car to buy her a laptop and paid her hostel fees, even though it left my savings empty. I told myself, it's okay. A mother's joy is seeing her child's dreams come true. Every night, I'd light a candle beside Daniel's photo and whisper, "We did it, love. Our little girl's becoming everything we hoped for." But as Clara moved further into her new world, she also moved further away from me. Calls became shorter. Visits became rarer. When she came home for holidays, she'd sigh and say, "Mom, this place feels so small." I'd smile, pretending not to notice the distance creeping between us. When she got married, she didn't ask for my blessing. She simply called one morning and said, "Mom, I'm marrying Brian next month. He's in finance, really successful. Don't worry, he's good to me." I met him only once before the wedding, a polite young man with sharp eyes and an even sharper smile. He shook my hand, firm and quick, and said, "Mrs. Carter, don't worry, I'll take care of your daughter." But something in his tone didn't sound like a promise, it sounded like a deal. Still, I trusted him. I wanted to believe that if Clara was happy, I'd done my job right. Their life together looked perfect from the outside. A big house in the suburbs, expensive cars, vacations to Italy, Paris, Hawaii. All the places I only saw in magazines. They sent me photos sometimes. Clara in elegant dresses, Brian with his arm around her waist, both smiling under foreign skies. I'd sit by the fireplace, holding those photos with pride. I'd show them to my church friends and say, "That's my daughter, the one who made it." But when the camera wasn't there, the truth was different. When I visited, I'd see how carefully she measured her words around him, how quickly she'd lower her eyes when he spoke. He was charming to others, but dismissive to her. She called it marriage compromise. I called it control. Then came their son, my sweet little angel Evan. When he was born, Clara called me in tears. "Mom, I don't know what I'm doing," she sobbed. "Can you come stay with me for a while?" I didn't even pack properly. I just grabbed my coat, my Bible, and a jar of homemade soup and took the first bus to her city. When I saw that baby, I felt life pour back into me. Tiny, soft, smelling of milk and heaven. He wrapped his hand around my finger, and I knew my purpose again. From that day on, I became more than a mother. I became a grandmother, a caretaker, a quiet pillar holding a house together. For years, I cooked, cleaned, rocked Evan to sleep, and helped Clara recover from postpartum depression. Brian rarely helped. He'd come home late, reeking of whiskey, muttering about pressure and responsibility. Once I heard him say to Clara, "Your mother's making this house feel like a nursing home. Tell her to leave soon." That night I cried quietly into my pillow, but Clara convinced me to stay, saying, "Mom, don't mind him. He doesn't mean it. We need you." And so I stayed. Because mothers always stay, even when they shouldn't. When Evan turned 7, Brian's business hit a rough patch. I offered to help from my small pension. He refused at first, pretending pride. Then, when the bills started piling, he accepted, with a cold thank you. Over the next few years, I gave them almost everything I had saved for my old age. Clara would say, "Mom, we'll pay you back when things settle down." And I'd smile, saying, "Sweetheart, you're already paying me back by being happy." But their happiness never came. What came instead was resentment. Brian began to see me as a burden, the old woman who never left, who used too much electricity and made Evan too soft. Clara stopped defending me. She grew quieter, colder. She started using his words, his tone, his reasoning. "Mom, maybe it's time you think about living on your own," she said once, stirring her coffee, not meeting my eyes. "I am living on my own," I replied softly. "I just happen to do it under the same roof as you." She didn't smile. She didn't even flinch. That's when I knew. My daughter wasn't just tired, she was changing. Then came the whispers about my forgetfulness. Brian started pointing out small things. "Mom, you left the stove on. Mom, you misplaced the keys again. Mom, you forgot your pills." At first I laughed it off. Then Clara started repeating it to friends. "She's getting old." We're worried about her memory. Before long, people were suggesting doctors, checkups, mental wellness assessments. It felt like watching someone slowly erase you, not with cruelty but with concern. And that's far more dangerous, because when people stop seeing you as capable, they stop seeing you as human. I began to notice locked drawers in the house, conversations that ended when I entered, bank documents, real estate papers, hidden behind, "Oh, it's just business stuff." I didn't push. I told myself they were adults, that I should mind my peace. But peace without truth is just silence wearing makeup. The night Evan warned me not to go home, I realized how deep the cracks had become. He was the only one who still saw me, the only one who noticed the small tremors in my hands, the sadness I tried to hide behind gentle smiles, and the only one brave enough to tell me something terrible was coming. Looking back now, I see every red flag I ignored, every time I let love excuse disrespect. Every time I believed silence was safer than honesty, I thought I was protecting my family. But what I was really doing was teaching them how to hurt me quietly. And yet, even then, I loved them. Fiercely, foolishly, entirely. Because that's what mothers do. We love until it breaks us. Then we gather the pieces and love again anyway. There's a kind of pain that doesn't scream. It just sits beside you at breakfast, smiling politely while pouring your tea. That's how it felt living with Clara and Brian during those last few months before everything fell apart. After Clara's letter and the boxes, life in that house changed. Not suddenly, but like a slow leak, one drop at a time. Until one morning I woke up and realized I was drowning. The first change was my breakfast. I used to make pancakes for Evan every morning just like I had for Clara when she was small. He loved them, fluffy, golden, with honey drizzled in the shape of a smile. But one day, Clara said, "Mom, don't cook anymore. You deserve to rest. We'll handle meals from now on." I thought it was kindness, until the next morning, when I came down and found Brian and Clara eating without me. Evan looked up from his cereal and said softly, "Grandma, I saved you some." Clara frowned. "Evan, don't talk with your mouth full." I smiled, pretending not to notice the empty chair at the table. The chair that used to be mine. Then came the finances. One afternoon I went to the local pharmacy to buy my prescription. My debit card was declined. I thought it was a bank error until I checked my statement. My pension account was empty. I went home, shaking, and found Clara in the kitchen. "Sweetheart," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "did you use my card for something?" She didn't look up. "Oh, that. Brian needed to cover some property taxes. We'll pay you back soon." "Without asking me?" "Mom," she sighed, "you said your money is for the family. Why are you being so dramatic?" I stood there, feeling like I had stepped into someone else's life. Someone foolish, someone invisible. I wanted to say, "It's not about money, it's about respect." But I knew the words wouldn't matter, because when people stop seeing you as an equal, your words lose weight before they even leave your lips. Brian's behavior grew bolder. He'd make comments in front of guests, little jabs wrapped in jokes. "Don't mind Mom, she forgets things sometimes," he'd laugh. Or, "She loves to give advice. Comes free with old age, I suppose." Everyone would chuckle, and I'd smile because what else could I do? If I didn't, they'd call me sensitive. One evening, they invited a few friends over for dinner. I had spent the afternoon making my special roast, the one Daniel used to love. The kitchen smelled like rosemary and memories. When they sat down, Brian took one bite, then pushed his plate away. "Too salty," he said flatly. Clara didn't even taste it, she just nodded. I could feel my cheeks burn. Evan looked between us, confused, then whispered, "It's really good, Grandma." I smiled at him, blinking away tears. But later that night I heard Clara scolding him. "Evan, don't contradict your father. You're encouraging Grandma to keep interfering. Interfering, that's what I had become, an interference." Slowly my world shrank. My chores were handled. My cooking was unnecessary. My opinions were outdated. I began spending more time in my room, reading, knitting, listening to the old songs Daniel loved. Sometimes Evan would sneak in and sit beside me. He'd tell me about school, about his dreams, about how he wanted to become an artist. "You'll be wonderful," I'd say. "You have your grandfather's hands." He'd grin, that same mischievous smile Daniel used to have, and whisper, "Don't tell Mom, but I like your food better than hers." Those moments kept me alive. But Brian didn't like them. He started telling Clara that I was turning Evan against them. I overheard him once saying, "He listens to her more than us, it's unhealthy. She's confusing the boy." Clara replied, "She's lonely, Brian, she means well." Well, good intentions won't pay bills, or buy privacy. That's when I realized I wasn't just unwanted, I was inconvenient. Then came the humiliation that broke whatever peace I had left. One Sunday during breakfast, Brian mentioned he had called a home caregiver agency. "For your mom," he said casually, sipping his coffee. Clara looked surprised. "A caregiver?" He nodded. "If she's staying here, someone needs to make sure she takes her meds, eats properly, doesn't wander off. I can't focus on work worrying about her. I froze. Brian, I said quietly, I'm not a child. He smiled faintly. No one said you were, Mom. We're just trying to help. Evan looked up, frowning. Grandma doesn't need help. She takes care of us. Evan! Clara snapped. Enough. Brian leaned back, smug, as if he had already won something. I excused myself, walked to my room and closed the door. I sat there, hands trembling, trying to breathe. It wasn't just the insult, it was the realization that this was all leading somewhere, slowly, deliberately. And I was being led out of my own life one small indignity at a time. That week the caregiver arrived, a young woman named Melinda. She was kind, polite, and uncomfortable. I'm just here a few hours a day, she said gently. They told me you might need some company. Company, another word for surveillance. I tried not to hold it against her. She was just doing her job. But I knew what Brian was doing. Building a case, a story, a version of reality that painted me as frail, forgetful, incapable. I was being rewritten. The final crack came one night when I heard them arguing. Their voices were low but sharp, slicing through the hallway like knives. She won't agree to sell the house, Brian, Clara said. Then make her agree, he snapped. Her name's still on the deed. Without that, we can't refinance. She's my mother, and she's holding us back. Silence. Then Clara's voice breaking, what if she never forgives me? Brian laughed coldly. She doesn't have to. She'll adjust at Maple Rest. They all do. I pressed my hand to my mouth, trying not to make a sound. My legs felt weak. My heart, heavier than I'd ever known. Now I understood. The nursing home wasn't about peace. It was about possession. My daughter wasn't protecting me. She was protecting their finances. For 2 days, I didn't speak to anyone. I went about my routine quietly, as if nothing had changed. But something inside me was burning, quietly, steadily, the kind of fire that doesn't destroy, the kind that purifies. Evan noticed. Grandma, are you sad? He asked. I smiled faintly. No, my dear, just thinking. About what? About what love really means. He looked puzzled. Love means being together. I nodded slowly. Sometimes it does. But sometimes, love means learning to stand alone, so others can see what they've lost. He didn't understand then, but someday he would. That night I prayed harder than I had in years. Not for forgiveness, not for understanding, for clarity. And I got it. A single thought came to me, clear as morning light. They want to take everything I built, but they can't take who I am. From that day, I began observing quietly. I noted the dates, the accounts, the documents. I watched where Brian kept his files, how often he met with his real estate agent, how he signed papers in my name when he thought no one noticed. It wasn't anger that drove me. It was truth. I had spent my life believing silence was noble, but silence only empowers the cruel. When Evan begged me not to go home that evening, he wasn't just scared for me. He was scared of what his parents had become. He had overheard something again, I later learned. Something about Monday morning and the final transfer. They planned to move me to Maple Rest permanently and take full control of my remaining savings and the house deed. That's why his little hands trembled when he said, "Don't go back home." He thought if I stayed away that night, I'd be safe, and maybe he was right. But at that moment, I didn't understand. If I had listened to him, maybe the next few days wouldn't have hurt so much. Maybe I wouldn't have seen my daughter's face harden completely. Maybe I wouldn't have felt the sting of betrayal so deep that it still aches even in peace. But maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't have found the strength to fight back either. Because pain has a way of waking you up. That evening, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the framed photo on the dresser, the one of Sarah holding newborn Daniel, and me standing behind her, smiling like a proud mother. The smile looked genuine back then, but now it felt like it belonged to someone else, someone naive, someone who believed that love alone could keep a family together. Daniel knocked softly on my door before peeking in. His small face, worried and pale, broke me. "Nana," he whispered, "Mom said you might leave. Is that true?" I froze. Leave? My own daughter was planning to send me away, again, without even saying it to my face. I pulled him close and kissed his forehead. "I'm not leaving you, sweetheart," I whispered. "Don't you worry." But deep down, I wasn't sure if I was telling him the truth. The next morning, Sarah came downstairs dressed for work, tapping her phone impatiently. "Mom, we need to talk," she said flatly. I looked up from the teacup I was washing. "Of course, dear." She didn't even sit down. "David's company is sending him abroad for 6 months. We've decided to go with him. It's a good opportunity for us." I blinked. "That's wonderful news." "Yes," she said, avoiding my eyes. "But you'll need to make arrangements. Maybe stay with Aunt Lorna until we get back. Or," she hesitated, "maybe it's time you moved into a senior home. They'll take good care of you." The words hit me like a slap. A senior home? I could feel my hands shaking, the spoon in my fingers clattering against the sink. "Sarah," I said softly, "I took care of you through sickness, heartbreak, and every storm in your life. And now you want to send me to strangers?" She sighed, annoyed. "Mom, please, don't make this dramatic. You can't live here forever. You don't contribute to the bills, and honestly, it's been stressful having you around. David and I need our space." "Stressful?" I repeated, my voice trembling. "All I do is cook, clean, and look after your son." She crossed her arms. "Exactly. You interfere. You make him too dependent on you. He needs to grow up. And I'm not a child anymore. I don't need your advice or your guilt." For a moment, everything went silent except the ticking clock on the wall. I thought of the countless nights I'd stayed up with her through fevers. The nights I skipped meals so she could eat. The days I worked 2 shifts to pay for her school shoes. And now, I was just a burden. A week later, she booked my room at Green Meadows Senior Living. I found the brochure lying carelessly on the kitchen table, between grocery receipts. Warm community, daily activities, independent living. It sounded like a sales pitch for loneliness. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing Sarah's voice in my head, sharp, impatient, dismissive. When had love turned into inconvenience? Around midnight I heard muffled voices from the living room. I crept quietly to the door. Sarah and David were talking. "She's not going to like it," David whispered. "She doesn't have a choice," Sarah snapped. "We can't keep paying for 3 people. And I'm done with her judgmental looks every time I order takeout or go out with friends. She needs to understand her place." I covered my mouth, afraid I'd sob out loud. My heart felt like it was splitting open. I wasn't judgmental, I was just trying to help her be better. I thought that's what mothers did. The next morning, Daniel refused to go to school. He clung to my arm, crying, "I don't want you to leave, Nana, please." Sarah's patience broke. "Daniel, enough, go to your room." He ran upstairs, sobbing. I looked at her and said quietly, "You're hurting your son." She turned on me. "And you're manipulating him. You make him feel guilty about everything. You guilt-tripped me my whole life, and now you're doing it to him." I swallowed my words. There was no point arguing with someone who had already decided what truth to believe. 2 days before they were supposed to leave, a man from the senior home arrived to check my paperwork. He was polite, professional, and utterly indifferent. He spoke about meals, activities, and routine medical care as if he were describing a boarding school. I nodded numbly, signing where he pointed, though my vision blurred through tears. After he left, I went upstairs and opened my old wooden box, the one with faded photographs and yellowed letters. There was one letter from Sarah when she was in college. It read, "Mom, I know I don't say it enough, but I couldn't do this without you. You are my strength. I love you." I held the letter against my chest and wept. How did that girl become this woman who couldn't stand the sight of me? The morning of their departure was silent. My suitcase sat near the door, small and pitiful. Daniel kept his face buried in his pillow. As the taxi pulled up, I touched Sarah's hand. "Please, don't do this. I can stay with a neighbor until you're back." She pulled her hand away. "Mom, stop. You're making this harder than it needs to be." Then she turned and walked out the door. David didn't even look at me. I stood in the doorway watching the car drive away, the sound of Daniel's crying fading with it. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly disposable. At Green Meadows, everything smelled of disinfectant and lavender. People sat in armchairs staring at televisions, their eyes distant. The staff smiled mechanically, the kind of smile that never reaches the eyes. "Room 214, the nurse said. "That'll be your space, my space. Not home, just a space." That night I sat by the small window and looked at the stars. I tried to pray, but no words came. Only tears. Days turned into weeks. I helped other residents with little things, reading letters, knitting scarves, but inside I was shrinking. Sarah rarely called. When she did, it was short. "Hi, Mom, we're busy. Daniel's fine, hope you're okay." Not once did she ask, "Are you happy?" 3 months later, I received a letter, but not from Sarah. It was from Daniel. He had scribbled it in pencil, probably hidden from his mother. "Dear Nana, I miss you every day. I cry at night because you're not here. Mom says you'll come back, but I don't believe her. Please don't forget me. Love, Daniel." I read it over and over, tears soaking the paper. That little boy, my only grandchild, was the reason I was still breathing. I knew then that something had to change. I couldn't just fade away behind those walls while my grandson thought I'd abandoned him. But how could I fight against my own daughter? A month later, fate intervened. One of the volunteers at the home, a kind young woman named Lydia, noticed my shaking hands while reading Daniel's letter. She gently asked what was wrong. I told her everything, how I'd been sent away, how Sarah had taken over my home, and how my grandson thought I'd left him by choice. She listened quietly, then said something I'll never forget. "Mrs. Collins," she said softly, "you don't have to stay silent just because you're kind. Sometimes love means standing up for yourself, even when it's against your own blood." Her words lit a small fire inside me. That night, for the first time in months, I slept peacefully, not because I was okay, but because I'd made a decision. I was going to take back my life. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. The sky outside my small window was the color of ashes, the world still half asleep. For months, my life had moved like a slow gray river. Quiet, resigned, lifeless. But something inside me had shifted. Lydia's words kept echoing. Sometimes love means standing up for yourself, even when it's against your own blood. I sat at the little desk by my bed, pulled out a sheet of paper, and wrote only 3 words: "Take it back." Over the next few days, Lydia and I spent our evenings talking in the common room after her shift. She was studying law, volunteering at Green Meadows to complete her coursework. She reminded me so much of a younger Sarah, full of light, empathy, and ideals that hadn't yet been traded for convenience. "Mrs. Collins," she said one evening, "do you still own your house?" Her question caught me off guard. "Yes," I said slowly. "At least I think so. I never sold it, I just moved out." She frowned. "Do you have the papers? They're probably still in my safe." "At home," I murmured, realizing what that meant. At home, where Sarah now lived, sleeping in my room, cooking in my kitchen. Lydia tapped her chin thoughtfully. "Then you need to find out. If your name's still on that deed, they can't legally evict you." Her words struck me like lightning. For the first time in months, hope felt possible. A few days later, Lydia helped me make some calls. It turned out my property taxes were still being paid from my old joint account, the one I had set up years ago with Sarah for family emergencies. And the title deed? Still under Margaret Collins. I was trembling when I held the emailed document in my hands. My name, mine, was right there in bold print. I hadn't lost everything after all. I'd just been too hurt to fight for it. That night, I sat on my narrow bed, whispering to myself, "Enough, Margaret, enough crying, enough silence." For so long, I had mistaken endurance for love, letting people walk over me because I couldn't bear to see them uncomfortable. I had told myself that mothers must always forgive, always give, always stay small so their children could grow. But that wasn't love. That was fear, the fear of losing them, and ironically, it had made me lose them anyway. Lydia helped me reach out to a legal advisor she knew through her internship, Mr. Jonathan Myers, a kind older lawyer who specialized in elder rights. He met me in the small cafeteria of the senior home, carrying a briefcase and a reassuring smile. "Mrs. Collins," he said, "I've read your documents. Technically, your daughter has no right to remove you from your property. If you wish, I can draft a notice requesting that she vacate your home or reestablish your residency there." I blinked. You mean I could go home? He nodded. Legally and rightfully. But you should prepare for emotional backlash. Cases like this aren't just about property, they're about power. Power. Such a simple word, yet I'd never thought of it that way. Sarah didn't just want my house, she wanted control. Do it, I said firmly. My voice didn't tremble this time. Send the notice. The following week, the official envelope was delivered to my daughter's address. That evening, my phone, silent for weeks, suddenly buzzed. Sarah's name flashed on the screen. Mom, she snapped before I could speak. What the hell is this letter? I took a slow breath. It's my home, Sarah. I never signed it away. Her voice rose. You're unbelievable. After everything we've done for you, I interrupted quietly. You mean after everything I've done for you? I raised you, sheltered you, gave you love without limits. I didn't deserve to be discarded. She was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was cold. So that's how it is. Fine. You want the house? Take it. We'll leave. But don't expect me to ever forgive you. And then she hung up. My hands were shaking, but I didn't cry. For the first time, I felt something stronger than sadness, dignity. 2 weeks later, Lydia came with me as I stepped back into my old home. The air smelled of lemon cleaner and faint perfume. Sarah's. Some of her things were still scattered about, a scarf on the chair, a mug by the sink, a photo of her and Daniel smiling at the beach. I touched the frame gently. I never wanted this to be a war, I whispered. Lydia put her hand on my shoulder. It's not a war, Mrs. Collins, it's a boundary. That evening I sat in my living room, and watched the sunset through the same window where I used to rock baby Sarah to sleep. The silence wasn't lonely anymore, it was peaceful. Still one ache remained. Daniel. He hadn't called and I didn't know where they had gone. Every night I'd pray, God, please let that boy know his Nana didn't abandon him. Weeks passed, and slowly I began to rebuild my rhythm. I planted roses in the garden again, baked for the neighbors, even joined a book club at the library. Lydia visited often, bringing laughter and stories from her university. One afternoon, while I was pruning the roses, I heard a small voice behind me. Nana? I turned, and there he was, Daniel. Taller, older, his school bag hanging from his shoulder. I gasped, dropping my shears. Daniel! He ran into my arms, hugging me tightly. I found you! Mom didn't want me to come, but I had to. I missed you so much. Tears poured down my face as I held him. Oh, sweetheart, I missed you too. He pulled back slightly, his eyes red. Mom said you didn't want to live with us anymore, that you chose to leave. I sighed. That's not true, darling. I never wanted to leave you. But sometimes adults make choices they think are right, even when they hurt others. He frowned. I told her it was wrong. I smiled faintly. You're brave and kind. Never lose that. After that day, Daniel started visiting me every weekend. At first, Sarah resisted, but over time she stopped fighting it. I think a part of her knew, despite her anger, that she'd gone too far. Then, one evening, as I was making tea, the doorbell rang. I opened it and found Sarah standing there, eyes tired, hands trembling. Can I come in? She asked quietly. I nodded. We sat at the table in silence for a long time. Finally, she whispered, I got your letter from the lawyer. I thought you were trying to hurt me, but maybe you were just trying to protect yourself. I looked at her, really looked at her. Beneath the frustration and pride was still my little girl, lost and scared. I wasn't fighting you, Sarah, I said softly. I was fighting for me. She nodded, tears filling her eyes. I'm sorry, Mom, I was angry, overwhelmed. I didn't know how to handle everything. You didn't deserve what I did. Hearing those words was like feeling sunlight after a long winter. I reached across the table and took her hand. We can't undo the past, sweetheart, but we can start again. She sobbed, covering her face. I held her hand until she stopped shaking. That night, after she left, I walked outside into my garden. The air was cool, fragrant with night jasmine. For the first time in years, I felt both free and whole. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed. It had become strength. I whispered into the quiet, Thank you, Lydia. Thank you, God. And thank you, Daniel, for reminding me what love really is. The stars above twinkled like soft witnesses. I smiled, realizing that home wasn't just a place. It was the courage to claim your worth, even when the world calls you selfish for doing so. The weeks that followed were a strange mix of peace and storm. On the surface, life had settled. Daniel's visits brought laughter back into the house. The garden was blooming again, and I could finally sit by the window with my tea without feeling hollow. But underneath, I could sense the tension building. Sarah hadn't yet faced what she'd done publicly, and as word spread through our small community that she had placed her own mother in a senior home while living in my house, whispers began to swirl. Neighbors who once greeted her with warmth now gave her tight smiles. People talked, and she hated that. Then one afternoon she showed up again. This time she wasn't crying. Her face was set, her jaw tight. She came straight to the point. "Mom, we need to talk about the house." I stayed calm. "All right, sit down, dear." She crossed her arms. "David wants me to fight the claim. He says you had no right to send that legal notice after everything we've done for you." I looked at her quietly. "Everything you've done for me? Or to me?" Her eyes flashed. "You're twisting things. You know how hard life's been. You had no idea how much pressure we were under. Bills, school fees." I held up a hand gently. "Sarah, stop. I know you've struggled. I've been there. But hurting someone else doesn't erase your pain." Her lips trembled, anger mixing with shame. "I was trying to survive." "I understand that," I said softly. "But survival shouldn't come at the cost of compassion. You took my home, Sarah, my life's work, and sent me away like I was nothing. You turned my grandson against me. Do you know what that felt like?" She fell silent, eyes darting away. For the first time, she didn't have a ready excuse. Just then, the front door opened. Daniel stepped in, holding a folder in his small hands. "Mom," he said, looking between us, "you forgot this at school." He looked at me, sensing the tension. "Are you fighting again?" Sarah sighed. "No, honey, just talking." He came closer and put the folder on the table, but as he turned to leave, he whispered to me, "Don't cry, Nana. You didn't do anything wrong." Sarah's eyes flickered with guilt. "Daniel, go wait in the car," she said softly. Once he was gone, she sank into a chair, covering her face. "I hate what I did," she whispered, "but I don't know how to fix it." I placed a hand on hers, by telling the truth. A week later, something unexpected happened. Mr. Myers, the lawyer, called me. "Mrs. Collins, your daughter's husband has filed a counterclaim. He's contesting the property rights. They're saying you transferred ownership verbally years ago." I closed my eyes, steadying myself. "I see." Lydia, who was sitting beside me, clenched her fists. "That's not fair. There's no document, no proof." I smiled faintly. "That's all right, dear. Let them speak their truth. I have mine." The court date arrived 2 months later. I wore a pale blue suit, simple and neat, the same one I'd worn to Sarah's college graduation. My hands shook as I fastened the buttons, not out of fear, but out of the weight of memory. In the courtroom, Sarah sat across from me with David by her side. His expression was cold, professional, the kind of man who thought money could silence morality. When the judge asked if I wished to speak, I stood slowly, leaning slightly on my cane. "Your Honor," I began, "I never wanted to be here. I never wanted to stand against my own daughter, but sometimes silence becomes another form of surrender, and I've been silent too long." I turned towards Sarah, my voice trembling but firm. "When you were little, Sarah, you used to say, 'Mom, when I grow up, I'll buy you a big house so you never have to work again.' And I'd smile and tell you that I already had everything I needed, because I had you. But somewhere along the way, we both forgot what home really means. It's not walls or furniture, it's respect, it's love. When you sent me away, I didn't lose a house, I lost my family, I lost my place in the world, and I came here not to punish you, but to reclaim my dignity." The room was silent. Even the clerk had stopped typing. The judge nodded. "Thank you, Mrs. Collins." Then it was David's turn. His lawyer spoke coldly about financial arrangements, verbal understandings, and mutual family benefit. But when they finished, the judge asked one question that changed everything. "Do you have any written proof that Mrs. Collins gave you ownership of the property?" David hesitated. "No, Your Honor, but—" "Then it stands," the judge interrupted. "The property remains in Mrs. Collins' legal name. Case closed. I exhaled slowly, tears burning my eyes. The gavel struck once, sharp and final, like the sound of a chain breaking. Outside the courtroom, Sarah stood apart from David, her face pale. He was already on his phone, muttering angrily about moving out and renting a place. I walked toward her. "Sarah." She looked up, eyes glistening. "You won." I shook my head gently. "No, sweetheart. We lost, both of us. You lost trust, I lost time. There are no winners here, only lessons." She began to cry softly. "I didn't mean to hurt you, I just wanted control. Everything felt so out of balance." I reached out and held her. "Then start by forgiving yourself. That's how you find balance again." She nodded, sobbing quietly into my shoulder. For a long time, we stood there, not mother and daughter divided by pride, but two broken women trying to mend what love had fractured. Over the following weeks, David moved out, taking his things and some of Sarah's. They had decided to take a break, as she called it. I didn't ask questions. I just offered her tea, the way mothers always do when the world feels too heavy. Slowly, she began helping me around the house again, cooking, gardening, laughing softly with Daniel in the evenings. One night, as we sat on the porch, she said quietly, "You know, Mom, when you stood up for yourself in court, I hated you for it, but now, I think I respect you more than ever." I smiled faintly. "Respect is born from truth, Sarah. Even painful truth." She nodded, eyes reflecting the soft gold of the setting sun. "You taught me that." Daniel came running outside with a drawing in his hand. "Look, Nana, it's our family. You, me, and Mom." I looked at the picture. 3 stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. For the first time in years, it felt complete. I hugged him tightly. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." A few weeks later, I hosted a small dinner for Lydia and Mr. Myers. It wasn't grand, just soup, bread, and laughter. As we sat around the table, I raised my glass. To truth, I said softly, and to the courage to speak it, no matter how late. They all smiled. When the evening ended, I stood by the window, watching the stars blink over the quiet neighborhood. The same stars I'd once stared at from the cold window of Green Meadows, the night I thought my story was over. But it wasn't over. It had just begun again, on my terms. That night, as I tucked Daniel into bed, he looked up at me with sleepy eyes and whispered, "Nana, you're my hero." I smiled, brushing his hair back. "Oh, my darling boy. I just learned to stop being afraid." He grinned. "Mom says you're the strongest person she knows." I kissed his forehead. "Maybe, but strength means nothing if it isn't kind." He nodded, already half asleep. "You're both strong and kind." I sat there in the dim light for a long time, listening to his soft breathing, feeling the quiet peace of a heart finally unburdened. The next morning, I walked through my garden, dew glittering on the petals, the air cool and clean. I felt every breath like a gift. I realized something profound that day, that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing. It means freeing yourself from the weight of someone else's choices. And I was free. Free from guilt, free from silence, free from the idea that love means losing yourself. It's been almost a year since that day in court. A year since I walked out with my head high, the sunlight warm on my face, and the weight of silence finally lifted off my shoulders. When I think back on it now, it doesn't feel like victory. It feels like awakening, because the truth is, life doesn't hand you peace. You have to build it, brick by brick, from the pieces of everything that once broke you. My days now begin softly. I wake up before the sun rises, make a cup of tea, and watch the light spread across the garden, over the roses, the lilac tree, the little bird bath Daniel and I painted together. Sometimes Sarah joins me. We sit in silence, side by side, the air between us quiet but gentle. We don't need to say much anymore. The apology she gave me that day has grown into something stronger, consistency. She shows up, she listens, she cares. And that, I've learned, is what real remorse looks like. Not perfect words, but better actions. Daniel still calls me Nana the Brave. He says it whenever I stand up for myself, even over small things. Once, when Sarah told me not to climb the stool to reach the top shelf, Daniel laughed and said, "Let her, Mom. She's Nana the Brave." We all laughed then, the kind of laughter that heals instead of hides. Sometimes I look at him and think, maybe this is why everything had to happen, so he could grow up seeing that love isn't submission, it's balance. Every now and then I still visit Green Meadows, not as a resident, but as a volunteer. There are faces there I'll never forget. Quiet women and men who, like me, once believed their worth had an expiration date. I read them stories, help with their garden, and remind them that it's never too late to take their life back. One woman, Clara, once said to me, "I wish I had your courage." I smiled and told her, "Courage doesn't mean you're not scared, dear. It means you decide something else matters more than fear." Sometimes I still think of David, my former son-in-law. He never reached out again after leaving Sarah. I heard through mutual friends that he remarried and moved to another state. I don't wish him ill. In fact, I pray for him, not out of fondness, but out of release, because hate keeps you chained to the very thing you're trying to escape. And I've spent enough of my life in chains. Sarah, for her part, is still rebuilding. She has a small job at a local firm now and has learned to live simply. Sometimes she apologizes again, quietly, when she thinks I've forgotten. "Mom," she'll say, her voice small, "I still don't know how you found it in your heart to forgive me." And I always tell her the same thing because holding on to pain would have kept me from loving you again. And I wanted to love you more than I wanted to be right. The past doesn't vanish. It lingers, like a faint scar, a whisper of who we were. But I've learned not to run from it anymore. Instead, I let it sit beside me, quietly teaching me. Pain taught me to listen to my heart. Loneliness taught me to value my own company. And betrayal taught me the kind of love that doesn't depend on anyone's approval. Some nights, when the house is still and the moonlight spills across the floor, I open the old wooden box, the same one that once held letters and regrets. Now it holds new things. A letter from Daniel saying, "Nana, thank you for teaching me to be brave." A pressed rose from the day Sarah and I replanted the garden. And a note from Lydia, written the week she graduated from law school, for the woman who taught me that justice isn't just about winning, it's about standing up for your worth. I keep those things close. They remind me that my story didn't end in bitterness. It ended in growth. If there's one truth I've discovered, it's this. Sometimes, the people who hurt you the most are the ones you raised with the purest love. And that realization doesn't mean you failed, it means you loved without expecting perfection. But love, even a mother's love, must have boundaries, because when you let someone cross them too many times, you start to lose the sound of your own voice. And once you find that voice again, you never, ever let it go. Now when I walk through my home, it feels alive again. Not because of the furniture or the fresh paint, but because every corner holds truth. The kitchen where I once cried alone now smells of cinnamon and laughter. The garden where weeds once grew wild now blossoms with color. Even the old armchair by the window, the one I used to sit in waiting for a call that never came, now feels like a throne of peace. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not broken. I'm just free. Free to live, to forgive, to dream. Free to be Margaret Collins, a woman who lost everything she thought to find her, only to discover that her worth was never in what she gave, but in who she was. And if you're listening to my story right now, and something in it feels too close, maybe you've been used, ignored, or forgotten by someone you love, then please hear me clearly. Don't let their choices convince you that your kindness was a mistake. Kindness is never wrong. Silence is. You deserve respect. You deserve love that doesn't ask you to disappear. And you deserve peace, even if you have to build it alone at first. Because peace built alone stays. True love cannot be bought, and freedom is worth any price. And you, my dear, what would you have done in my place? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments.